My alien roommate declared my chair. Her favorite place to sit, vertical bar, HFY Reddit vertical bar, HFY Reddit. Ethan never thought he would share his apartment with someone from another world. The program had sounded simple when the university introduced it. Students from the Galactic Alliance would be paired with humans to encourage cultural exchange. He had filled out the form half as a joke, thinking there was no way he would be chosen. Yet here he was, standing in the living room, waiting for his new roommate to arrive. The knock on the door was soft, almost musical. Ethan opened it to see a tall figure with silver skin that shimmered faintly under the light. The alien woman stood with calm posture, her large, dark eyes watching him with curiosity. She carried a single small case as if she needed nothing more. Zyra, she said in a voice that was smooth and clear. I will live with you while I study here. Ethan blinked. He had prepared himself to meet an alien, but nothing prepared him for how strangely graceful she looked. He quickly nodded and stepped aside to let her in. Welcome, I'm Ethan. This is... Well, it's not much, but it's home, he said, feeling awkward. Zyra stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning every corner of the apartment as if each object held great meaning. She moved closer to the couch, touched the lamp, and even crouched to look at the carpet fibers. Everything seemed to fascinate her. Then she saw it. In the corner by the window sat Ethan's old recliner, a little worn at the edges, the fabric softened by years of use. It was not a fancy piece of furniture, but to Ethan it was his sanctuary. It was where he read late at night, where he gamed after long classes, and where he sometimes dozed off with a blanket. Zyra walked straight to it, circled once like she was inspecting a throne, and then lowered herself into the chair. She adjusted her tall frame until she seemed perfectly at ease. Her long fingers tapped the armrest once, and then she leaned back with a sigh that almost sounded human. This, she said firmly, is my favorite place now. Ethan almost dropped the box he had been carrying. Wait, what? That's my chair. Zyra tilted her head. It is perfect. The structure supports my spine in a way I have not experienced before. It also provides a grounding presence. This will be my place. Ethan stared at her. Your place? No, that's not how this works. That chair is mine. I've had it for years. It's where He stopped, realizing how ridiculous he sounded arguing with a guest, let alone an alien guest. Still, the image of her declaring ownership so confidently made his frustration bubble. Look, you can use it sometimes, but it's not your chair, it's mine. Zyra blinked slowly as if trying to process his words, then she shook her head. In my culture, when individuals live together, each must claim a personal comfort space. It is necessary for peace of mind. This chair has been claimed. You may choose another. Ethan rubbed his temples. Great. So the chair is taken, and I get the floor? You may have the couch, Zyra offered, completely serious. He let out a laugh, half in disbelief. This is ridiculous. Of all the things in this apartment, you had to pick that chair. Zyra settled deeper into the recliner, crossing her long legs. She looked perfectly content, like a queen sitting on her throne. It is not ridiculous. It is logical. This chair belongs to both of us now, but primarily me. Ethan groaned. I don't believe this. The rest of the evening passed with Zyra exploring the apartment further, but she always returned to the chair as if bound by invisible gravity. When Ethan turned on the television, she watched from the recliner, asking endless questions about commercials, dramas, and why humans laughed at things that seemed nonsensical to her. When he tried to sit on the edge of the chair, she shifted slightly but did not move, leaving him cramped and uncomfortable. By the time night came, Ethan realized his life had already changed. His new roommate was not only an alien from across the stars, but also someone who had declared war over a piece of furniture. He looked at her stretched out in the recliner, clearly refusing to give it up, and wondered how he was supposed to survive the rest of the semester. Yet beneath the annoyance, there was a strange sense of curiosity. This was the first step into a new world, not just for him, but for all of humanity. Maybe, just maybe, something good would come out of it. For now, though, he would have to find another place to sit. Ethan woke up the next morning feeling stiff. The couch had been his bed for the night, and it was nothing compared to his recliner. He dragged himself into the living room, yawning, and stopped short. Zyra was already there, sitting in the chair with a steaming cup of tea in her hand. She looked as if she had been awake for hours, perfectly calm, watching the sunlight creep across the floor. "You're up early," Ethan muttered. "My sleep cycle is shorter than yours," Zyra said. "I rested, then I returned here. This chair restores balance to my body." She tapped the armrest like it was a sacred artifact. Ethan sighed and rubbed his eyes. "You really aren't kidding about this chair thing, huh?" "It is not a thing," she corrected. "It is essential. Every being must establish a personal comfort space when cohabiting. Without it, tension will grow." Ethan dropped onto the couch and grabbed a pillow. "Yeah, well, my tension is growing right now." Zyra tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle. "You are attached to this chair." "Of course I'm attached to it. It's mine. I've had it since high school. It's been through bad movies, good games, heartbreak, and finals week. It's not just a chair, it's my safe place." For a long moment, Zyra was quiet. Then she leaned forward, her expression serious. "Then we are the same. You describe it in human terms, but you feel what I feel. That is why I chose it. The energy of this chair called to me." Ethan blinked. "The energy of the chair?" "Yes. It is, how do you say, saturated with your presence. That makes it strong. And now it is mine too." Ethan groaned. "So basically you hijacked my memories and comfort spot because it felt nice?" Zyra looked pleased. "Exactly." Their argument was interrupted when Ethan's phone buzzed. He had class in half an hour. He rushed to get ready, throwing on a jacket and grabbing his bag. Zyra followed him to the door, still calm and elegant despite their disagreement. "At the university you will introduce me," she said. "I must learn human customs directly." Ethan hesitated. He had planned on giving her time to settle in, but clearly she had other ideas. "Fine, but don't tell people you stole my chair." Zyra blinked innocently. "But it is truth." When they reached campus, Ethan realized quickly that walking beside an alien was like carrying a giant spotlight. Students stopped mid-conversation. Some stared in awe, others in open curiosity, a few in nervous silence. Zyra seemed unaffected, her gaze sweeping across the buildings as though cataloging every detail. In class, she sat next to Ethan, but instead of paying attention to the lecture, she whispered constant questions. Why did humans write with ink instead of light? Why were chairs in classrooms less comfortable than the one at home? Why did professors speak so slowly when information could be transferred faster? Ethan tried to hush her, but her curiosity seemed endless. By lunchtime, his patience was running thin. They sat outside on the grass with other students nearby. Zyra balanced her tray on her knees, looking at her food suspiciously. "This is bread?" she asked, poking at her sandwich. "Yes," Ethan said, already biting into his. "It is dry. Put sauce on it." She opened the sandwich, squinted at the meat, then closed it again. Strange, but acceptable. As she took small bites, other students gathered the courage to approach. Some asked her about her world, others about her studies. Zyra answered with calm authority, explaining star systems Ethan had never heard of and sciences that sounded like magic. But when someone asked about her life on Earth so far, Zyra smiled in a way that made Ethan nervous. "I have found the greatest treasure in your world," she said proudly. "A chair." The group laughed, thinking she was joking, but Ethan buried his face in his hands. On the walk home, he confronted her. "You didn't have to tell everyone about the chair." "Why not?" she asked, confused. "It is the truth. It is my favorite place. Because they think I'm letting you boss me around." Zyra paused, her expression softening. "Do you feel diminished?" "Yes," Ethan said. "It was mine. Now it feels like I've been pushed out of my own spot." For the first time, Zyra looked thoughtful instead of stubborn. In my culture, comfort spaces are not about ownership. They are about harmony. By choosing your chair, I showed trust. I chose to share in your comfort, not to take it away. Ethan stopped walking, caught off guard by her words. He wanted to argue, but the way she said it made him hesitate. She wasn't trying to insult him. In her own alien way, she thought. She was bonding. When they reached the apartment, Zira immediately sat back in the recliner, curling into it as though it belonged to her alone. But this time she looked at Ethan and gave a small gesture, patting the edge of the chair. "Sit," she said simply. Ethan frowned. "You want me to squeeze in next to you?" "Yes." "We can share. It is your chair, but now it is also mine. Together, it can be ours." Ethan hesitated, then sat down carefully. It was awkward at first. Her long limbs took up most of the space, but after a few moments he realized it wasn't so bad. Zira seemed pleased, leaning back and folding her hands calmly. The recliner creaked under the weight of both, but Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe he hadn't lost his chair completely. Maybe he had just gained a strange, silver-skinned roommate who thought sharing was the same thing as claiming. For the first time, the argument over the chair felt less like a battle, and more like the beginning of something new. The days passed slowly, and Ethan began to notice a pattern. No matter what happened during the day, Zira always ended up in the recliner. It was as if the chair had become her station, her throne, and her sanctuary all at once. She studied there, ate there, and sometimes even meditated in complete silence while Ethan tiptoed around her. At first, Ethan had resisted. He made jokes about charging her rent for the chair or leaving sticky notes that said, "Reserved for human use only." Zira had simply tilted her head, calmly removed the notes, and sat back down. Nothing could move her from that spot. But something began to change in Ethan too. One evening, after a long day of classes and errands, Ethan walked into the apartment to find Zira curled in the chair with a book in her hand. The sight stopped him cold. She wasn't reading one of her alien texts, but one of his old novels that he had left on the shelf. It was a paperback, bent and worn, with faded ink on the cover. "You're reading that?" Ethan asked, dropping his bag by the door. "Yes," Zira replied, her eyes still on the pages. "The words are strange, but the story is clear. It is about humans fighting for freedom." "That's one of my favorites," Ethan admitted. "I read it during high school. Got me through some rough times." Zira looked up at him with her calm, deep gaze. "Then I understand you better by reading it." Ethan felt something shift. For the first time, he didn't just see Zira as the alien who had stolen his chair. She was trying to understand him, to connect with him in the only way she knew how. Slowly, he walked over and leaned against the armrest. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Zira shifted slightly, making a little room. It wasn't much, but enough for Ethan to sit awkwardly beside her. They both fit, though tightly, and the recliner groaned as if protesting. For a while. They sat in silence, Zira reading aloud the words she struggled with, and Ethan helping her pronounce them. Her voice was smooth, but carried a rhythm that made even ordinary dialogue sound musical. Eventually, when the book became too confusing, Zira closed it and turned to him. "Tell me a human story," she said. Ethan blinked. "A story?" "Yes. A true one. Something that shows what humans value." Ethan thought for a moment. Then he began to talk about his childhood, about summers spent riding bikes with friends, about camping trips under the stars, about how his father taught him to build fires and his mother taught him to cook. Zira listened with rapt attention, her expression never breaking, as though each detail mattered. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "You humans are attached to small things, fires, food, family, chairs. You place meaning in objects and moments, that is why you endure. My people sometimes forget this." Ethan leaned back, surprised at how thoughtful her words were. "What about your people? What do you value?" Zira's gaze grew distant. "We value knowledge. We travel between stars seeking answers to questions. We perfect our bodies, our minds, and our society. But in doing so, we lost some of what you described. We no longer sit around fires or cling to chairs. We drift, always moving, never stopping to rest. There was a long pause. Ethan could almost hear the faint hum of her breathing, steady and calm. "That sounds lonely," he said quietly. "It is," Zira admitted. "That is why I chose this chair. It is more than comfort. It reminds me of something I never had, the sense of belonging to a single place." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time he felt the weight of what the chair meant to her. It wasn't just stubbornness. It was her way of finding something she had been missing her whole life. Later, that night, Ethan set up his game console. Normally he would play alone, but this time Zira insisted on joining. She sat in the chair with the controller, fumbling with the buttons while Ethan guided her. She lost every round, but her laughter, strange and bright, filled the room. Ethan couldn't remember the last time gaming had been this fun. As the night grew late, Zira leaned back in the recliner, handing him the controller. "Your games are frustrating but full of life," she said. "I like them." Ethan smiled. "They're better when you play with someone." Zira tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching the light. "Then perhaps we will play again tomorrow." For the first time since she had claimed the chair, Ethan didn't feel like he had lost something. Instead, he felt like he had gained someone who was slowly becoming part of his life. The recliner wasn't just his anymore, and maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. As he leaned against the chair's armrest, half watching the screen, half listening to Zira hum softly in her own language, he realized that the silly argument about ownership had turned into something else entirely. The chair had become a bridge, a place where human and alien could sit together, share stories, and learn to understand each other. And strangely, Ethan no longer minded. Ethan had grown used to the whispers on campus. Ever since Zira arrived, people stared whenever the two of them walked into a lecture hall or cafeteria. Some students were curious, others amazed, but there were also those who seemed uneasy. It wasn't hard to notice. Humans were new to the Galactic Alliance, and many aliens did not yet know what to make of them. One afternoon, Ethan was heading toward the library when he overheard two alien students talking in hushed voices near the stairs. Their tall frames and glowing eyes marked them as a different species, one far older than humanity. "Why are humans allowed in the Alliance?" one of them muttered. "They are weak, short-lived. Their minds are slow. They cling to primitive things," the other agreed. "Chairs, food, family. They have nothing to offer." Ethan clenched his fists. He wanted to say something, but before he could move, Zira appeared at his side. Her steps were silent, her expression calm. But Ethan saw the tension in her eyes. She had heard every word. The alien students glanced at her, hesitated, and quickly walked away. Zira stood still for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the floor. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly. Zira didn't answer right away. Finally, she whispered, "They are from my world's allies. Their view is common." Ethan frowned. "You don't believe that, do you?" Zira looked at him, her dark eyes serious. "I have seen your strength, Ethan, but my people value different things. If I defend you, I will stand alone." That night, back at the apartment, Zira sat in the recliner without speaking. She stared out the window at the city lights, her long fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. Ethan sat on the couch watching her, trying to find the right words. "You know," he said finally, "you don't have to care what they think." "But I do," Zira replied. "I am here as a student of the Alliance. If I speak against my peers, they will question my loyalty. If I stay silent, I betray you." Ethan leaned forward. "You're not betraying me. People will think what they want. You don't have to fight every battle." Her voice was quiet but firm. "In my culture, silence is agreement. If I say nothing, they will believe I see you as weak." Ethan had no answer. He sank back into the couch, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, the chair looked less like her throne and more like a shield she was hiding behind. The next few days were difficult. In class, Zira participated less. She asked fewer questions and spoke more cautiously. Ethan noticed the change and it bothered him. At night, when they usually laughed over games or shared stories, she was quieter. The recliner, once a place of connection, now felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, one evening, Ethan decided he couldn't stand it anymore. He dropped into the chair's armrest beside her, crowding her space. She didn't move away but turned her head slowly to face him. "You know what I think?" Ethan said. "I think those guys are scared." Zira raised an eyebrow. "Scared? Of humans?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "We're new. We don't live as long as you. We don't have the same tech, but we adapt. We keep pushing forward even when things get tough. That makes us unpredictable, and unpredictable is scary." Zira considered his words, her expression unreadable. He leaned closer. "You told me before that you chose this chair because it felt alive, because it carried meaning. That's what humans do. We put meaning into everything. It makes us stubborn, but it also makes us strong. If your people can't see that yet, then maybe you're the one who can show them." Zira was silent for a long time. Finally, she sighed, a sound Ethan rarely heard from her. "You believe in your species with a strength that surprises me." "I have to," Ethan said simply. "If we don't believe in ourselves, why should anyone else?" Zira looked back at the city lights, but her shoulders relaxed a little. The tension seemed to ease, even if only slightly. That night, as Ethan turned off the lights and prepared for bed, Zira spoke again from the recliner. Her voice was softer than usual. "I fear what will happen if I stand against them," she admitted. "But I fear more what will happen if I do not." Ethan stopped at his bedroom door, looking at her silhouette in the chair. "Then you already know what you have to do." She didn't answer, but when Ethan closed his door, he heard her whisper to herself in her own language, a quiet phrase that sounded almost like a promise. For the first time in days, Zira did not look like she was only sitting in the chair for comfort. She looked as if she was gathering strength from it, preparing for something bigger than either of them had expected when this strange roommate arrangement began. The university announced a special field trip, one meant to test cooperation between species. Students from different worlds would be dropped on a remote training planet, forced to work together to survive for several days. Ethan was nervous when he heard the news, but Zira seemed calm as ever. "This will be simple," she said while sitting in the recliner the night before. "It is only training." "Yeah," Ethan muttered, "but training for you might mean camping for me." "Big difference," she tilted her head, amused. "I will rely on your primitive survival skills then." The next morning, groups of students were transported by shuttle to the training site. The planet looked peaceful at first, rolling hills, wide skies, and patches of forest. But the instructors made it clear, communication equipment would be limited, supplies minimal. They were expected to adapt, cooperate, and endure. At first, everything went smoothly. Zira's team included Ethan, 2 humans, and 3 aliens from different species. They set up camp, dividing tasks. Zira and another alien handled navigation, while Ethan and the other humans gathered wood and water. For a while, the group worked together without trouble. But on the second night, a storm rolled in. The sky darkened, winds howled, and the rain fell in sheets. The camp's equipment, designed for controlled training, malfunctioned under the intensity. Tents collapsed, fires died, and the group scrambled for shelter. Panic spread quickly. One of the aliens, tall and fragile-looking, began to shout, "We will not survive this, the storm will destroy us." Another fumbled with a broken communicator, calling out in frustration, "No signal, no rescue." Ethan felt fear too, but he pushed it down. He grabbed the nearest flashlight and shouted above the wind, "We need to move. The trees will shield us from the worst of it. Follow me." The others hesitated, but Zira's voice cut through the noise. "Do as he says." With Ethan leading, they stumbled through the rain into the forest. Branches whipped against them, mud sucked at their boots, but finally they found a cluster of rocks that formed a natural shelter. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Once inside, Ethan set to work. He gathered dry sticks from under the rocks, used a lighter from his pocket, and coaxed a small fire to life. The warmth spread, calming everyone. The other humans followed his lead, reinforcing the fire and setting up makeshift walls with fallen branches. Zyra watched him closely, her dark eyes shining in the firelight. While others had frozen in fear, Ethan had acted without hesitation. By morning, the storm had passed. The group was tired and soaked, but safe. The aliens, who had once scoffed at human weakness, now looked at Ethan with something close to respect. "You knew what to do," one said quietly. "You saved us." Ethan shrugged, embarrassed. "Just common sense. Humans camp a lot. We've been dealing with storms forever." But Zyra shook her head. "It was not common. You adapted. You acted. That is what makes you strong." The rest of the exercise continued, but the mood had changed. Whenever trouble arose, whether finding food, building tools, or calming disputes, it was Ethan the group turned to. He wasn't the smartest or the strongest, but he was steady, practical, and determined. On the final night, as the group sat around a fire, one of the alien students admitted, "I thought humans were fragile, but now I see differently. You bend, but you do not break." Ethan didn't know how to respond, but Zyra did. She lifted her chin proudly. "This is what I have been trying to explain. Humans give meaning to the smallest things. That meaning becomes strength. I saw it, first in a chair, now I see it here in survival." Ethan nearly choked on his food. "Seriously? You're bringing up the chair now?" The group laughed, even the aliens, though they didn't understand the full story. Zyra only smiled, her calm expression softening. When the shuttle finally returned to pick them up, Ethan was exhausted, but proud. As they boarded, Zyra walked beside him in silence. Once seated, she leaned closer and whispered, "You changed everything, Ethan. Now they will see humans as I do." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And how's that?" Zyra's eyes glimmered. "Resilient, clever, worthy." For once, Ethan had no joke ready. He just sat back, feeling something warm spread through his chest. Maybe it wasn't only about proving himself to the others. Maybe it was about proving that humans, in all their stubborn, clumsy ways, truly belonged among the stars. When they returned to the apartment that night, the first thing Zyra did was collapse into the recliner. She looked at Ethan with a faint smile. "You may have saved a group of students, but this chair is still mine." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Fine. But at least let me sit on the armrest. Hero privileges." She nodded solemnly, as though granting him the highest honor. And for the first time, Ethan felt the chair was no longer just his or hers. It was theirs, the symbol of something bigger than either of them had expected when this strange journey began. The university council chamber was filled with voices. Representatives from different species gathered to discuss the progress of the exchange program. The air carried tension, and Ethan could feel it the moment he walked inside. He wasn't supposed to be there, but Zyra had asked him to come. He sat at the back while she walked forward, calm and steady, her silver skin gleaming under the bright lights. The debate had already started. A tall alien with glowing ridges across his skull raised his voice. "Humans are not ready. They are reckless. They depend on luck instead of knowledge. The Alliance cannot waste resources on a species so primitive." Others nodded in agreement. A few spoke in softer voices, saying humans were curious but fragile. Ethan clenched his fists. He wanted to shout, to argue, but he knew this wasn't his fight. This was Zyra's choice. When her turn came, Zyra stepped into the center of the chamber. Her voice was calm but carried through the hall. "You speak of humans as though you know them, but I live with one. I study beside him. I have seen not weakness, but strength." The hall grew quiet. Many eyes turned toward her, some skeptical, others curious. Zyra continued without hesitation. "Humans endure. They bend without breaking. When storms came during the survival test, it was a human who acted when others froze. He found shelter, built fire, and gave courage to those who lost hope. This is not weakness. This is resilience." A voice from the crowd interrupted. "A single act does not prove the worth of an entire species." Zyra raised her chin. Then let me tell you another truth. Humans place meaning into small things. Objects, stories, even a simple chair. At first I thought this was strange. But then I understood. That meaning gives them strength. It roots them when the universe shifts around them. It makes them fight harder for the people and places they care about. Ethan shifted in his seat, heat rising in his cheeks. He hadn't expected her to mention the chair, but the way she spoke made it sound like more than furniture. It had become a symbol. Zira's voice grew stronger. My people value knowledge. We travel the stars and gather answers. But in our search, we lost something important. Humans remind us that meaning is not only in the stars. It is here, in the bonds we share. That is why they belong in the Alliance. Not because they are the strongest or the longest lived, but because they are alive in a way that inspires. The chamber fell silent. For a long moment no one spoke. Then a representative from another species, one with wide dark eyes and a soft voice, leaned forward. You speak with passion, Zira of Jal. Perhaps you see something the rest of us have overlooked. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some still looked doubtful, but others seemed to reconsider. The debate slowly shifted. Less harsh, more balanced. For the first time, humans were being spoken of with respect instead of dismissal. At the back of the hall, Ethan let out a quiet breath. He hadn't realized he was holding it. He felt a strange mix of pride and embarrassment. Pride because Zira had defended his species with such fire. Embarrassment because she had done it by telling the story of a chair. When the meeting ended, Zira walked back to him. Her expression was calm, but he saw a faint spark in her eyes. You didn't have to do that, Ethan said quietly. Yes, she replied. I did. Silence would have meant agreement. I could not let them see humans as weak when I know otherwise. Ethan gave her a small smile. You made us sound better than we are. Zira shook her head. No, I only told the truth. You are flawed, yes. But those flaws make you stronger. You do not hide them, you turn them into fuel. They walked back to the apartment in silence, the night air cool around them. When they entered, Zira immediately sat in the recliner, curling into it with ease. Ethan dropped onto the couch across from her, watching her with tired eyes. So the chair's famous now, he joked. Half the council knows about it. Zira's lips curved in the faintest smile. It is not the chair. They will remember. It is the meaning. That is what matters. Ethan shook his head with a laugh. You really turned my favorite seat into a galactic lesson. Unbelievable. Perhaps, Zira said softly. But it worked. For the first time since the program began, Ethan felt the weight of the future shift. Maybe humanity still had a long road ahead, but tonight they had taken one step forward. Not through politics, not through technology, but through trust, stories, and yes, even a chair. As Zira leaned back, her eyes closing in quiet thought, Ethan realized something important. The chair no longer belonged to just him or just her. It belonged to both of them, and to everything their unlikely friendship represented. The days after the council meeting felt different. Ethan noticed it first when students from other species no longer looked at him with the same mix of doubt and amusement. Some even approached him to ask questions about Earth, about human culture, about things that once seemed too small to matter. For the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt seen. Zira, however, remained the same in many ways. She still spent most evenings in the recliner, stretched out like it had been made for her. Ethan sometimes wondered if she claimed it so often because it gave her comfort in an unfamiliar world, just as it had done for him. He no longer argued about it. The chair had become their silent meeting place, a place where words weren't always needed. One quiet evening, Ethan returned from a long study session. The room was dim, only the soft hum of city lights drifting through the window. Zira was already in the chair, reading from a glowing tablet. She looked up when he entered. You are late, she said simply. Yeah, the lab kept me longer than I thought, Ethan replied, dropping his bag. He leaned against the couch, watching her with a faint smile. You know, for someone who calls me reckless, you've made a habit of waiting up. Zira tilted her head, silver eyes steady. Someone must ensure you do not forget to eat or sleep? Humans are strange like that. He laughed quietly and sank onto the couch. For a while, silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint rustle of her turning pages on the tablet. Then, after a long pause, Ethan spoke. You know, I've been thinking about what you said at the council. About meaning. About how humans put value in small things. I didn't realize how true it was until I saw you talk about it. Zyra set the tablet aside, her gaze never leaving him. It was true. Your people make meaning where others would not. You did that with this chair. And now? So did I. Ethan nodded slowly. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Out of everything in this galaxy, what connects us most is an old recliner. Zyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. It is not the chair. It is the bond we built because of it. The words settled over him with quiet weight. For the first time since he'd left Earth, Ethan felt that this strange world, this vast universe, could also be home. He realized that Zyra had become more than a roommate, more than a partner in a university program. She was a friend, maybe, the closest one he'd ever had. The following week, news reached them that the council had not dismissed humanity from the program. Instead, they had decided to extend the trial, to give humans more opportunities to prove themselves. Ethan knew this was because of Zyra's defense, because she had spoken when no one else would. When he told her the news, Zyra only gave a small nod. It is only a beginning, she said. The path ahead is long, but beginnings are important. That night, the apartment felt unusually warm, filled with an unspoken relief. Ethan walked over to the recliner where Zyra was already curled. Instead of claiming the couch, he stood in front of her and raised an eyebrow. You know, we've been fighting over this chair since the first week, he said. Zyra's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, and I have won each time. True, Ethan admitted, smiling. But maybe tonight we call a truce. Before she could reply, he carefully sat down on the armrest. The chair groaned in protest but held. Zyra gave him a sharp look, but she didn't push him off. Instead, she shifted slightly, making room in the only way possible. For a moment, they both sat in silence, the closeness awkward but not unwelcome. Then Ethan spoke softly. Guess it's not just your favorite place anymore, now it's ours. Zyra studied him, her silver eyes thoughtful. Finally, she leaned back with a quiet hum. Yes, ours. The word hung in the air, simple yet powerful. It wasn't about ownership of a chair anymore. It was about trust, about sharing space in a universe that often felt too vast and too divided. The chair had become a symbol of something larger, something neither of them could have imagined at the start. As the night deepened, Ethan felt his eyelids grow heavy. Zyra's calm presence beside him made the world quieter, safer. He thought of Earth, of the uncertain road ahead for his people, of the trials still waiting. But for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. The recliner creaked, again as they both settled into it, two unlikely friends in one shared space. Outside, the stars stretched across the sky, countless and endless. Inside, the chair held them steady, a reminder that even in the vastness of the universe, meaning could be found in the simplest things. And so the human and the alien sat together, not as rivals or strangers, but as companions. Proof that connection could begin with something as small as a chair and grow into something that could shape the future of two worlds.